We're going to begin working through the section of text for this week, and we'll start with verses 15 through 17 of chapter 1. We're drawing the title of the section from the ESV Study Bible, Christ is Lord of Creation. Let's pick up in verse 15 here, and we'll read it in Greek first. Hos estin ekon tu theou, tu aoratu, prototakos, passes ktiseos. Okay, and we notice we begin with a relative pronoun, hos, right? Who, or which, or that. Here it's who, and it's referring all the way back to verse 13, right? In verse 13, last week we saw the reference to the Son, right? God has transferred us into the kingdom of the Son of His love. So here we have the Son, and then in verse 14 we have a reference back to the Son, in whom we have redemption, the forgiveness of sins. And here in 15 we continue referring back to the Son. I think that's obscured in many English translations that will change this to He or the Christ. And I do think what's missed there is that Paul's prayer has led him into this beautiful language of praise. Now, conceptually and syntactically, this section is distinct, right? We don't have, where are the personal pronouns? You, us, they've disappeared, right? The adverbial participles have disappeared. Instead, we have the staccato or rhythmic style, perhaps a hymn, perhaps Paul's confessional composition. But let's pick up here. So who is, right? That's just from a me. And then we're expecting another word in the nominative, right? We have the subject nominative is the relative pronoun. We have a to be verb. And then here's our predicate nominative. I don't know if you recognize that. Some of you thought it was a genitive plural form. It's not a genitive plural form. It is a third declension noun. He, a cone, to a konos, right? So this is the word for image, visible representation, talking about Jesus. Who is the image of the invisible God? Who is the image of the invisible God? Notice this adjective here for invisible has that alpha privative. Remember, the alpha on the beginning of something makes it not. So we see the idea of visible there, and it's not visible. The not visible God. That's an attributive use of the adjective modifying God. Jesus is the visible representation, the image of the invisible God. One commentator, you may have heard this quote as well, I think rightly noted that humans are made in the image of God, but Jesus alone is described in the scriptures as the image of God. Jesus, the incarnate Son of God, is the image of God, the visible representation of God. And it does call to mind the language of John, the beginning of the Gospel of John, chapter 1, where John asserts that no one has ever seen God, but God the one and only, who is at the Father's side, has made him known, right? And Jesus here is further described as the prototokos, passes ktiseos, the firstborn over all creation. The firstborn over all creation. So what we have here is a genitive of subordination, over all creation. This language of firstborn is a little bit confusing to us, right? It can refer to just priority in time, or it can refer to priority in rank. And commentators frequently note several things about this. I'll just point out, as we're here, I'll point out that you can, if you have the Net Bible, I'm hovering over the Net Bible here, has very helpful notes on prototokos and on the genitive of subordination. You can find the Net Bible notes online. I'm not going to read them to you, but if you just Google Net Bible, you can find extensive translation notes. What I want to look at, though, is the use of prototokos in Psalm 89, right? And I'm using the numbers from the English Bible. Psalm 89 in your English Bible is Psalm 88 in the Septuagint. You may know there's slight differences in the numbering, versification, and chapter numberings in the Septuagint, especially in the Psalms. And so here we have a psalm about David. I have found David my servant, Psalm 89:20, and there, Dawid. And then we'll skip down here to, in English, Psalm 89:27. We skip down to verse 27 here, and God is describing David as the firstborn, the highest of the kings of the earth, this Davidic king. And you may remember David was the youngest of his family. He was the youngest of 8 sons. He was not the firstborn in that sense, but he was firstborn and he was in the sense of being preeminent, God's chosen preeminent one, his preeminent king. Notice in Greek there, in the Septuagint, again, the versification of the Septuagint is slightly different, Psalm 88:28, but the same word, prototakon, is, of course, here it's the accusative form, but when we were looking here, it's in the nominative form. Why is it nominative in Colossians 1:15? Because it is appositional to the nominative akon. It's restating Jesus is the visible representation of the invisible God. He is the firstborn, the preeminent one over all creation. Let's continue on with verse 16. Hoti in auto ekatisthe ta panta, intois uranois, kai epites geis, ta horata, kai ta aorata, eta thranoi, eta kuriatetes, eta archai, eta exousiai, ta panta diautu, kai eis autan ekatistai. All right, we begin with this hoti, because, and we might want to glance back and say, well, what is he giving us the cause of? Well, that Jesus is preeminent. He's the firstborn over all creation, because creation has its origin and purpose in him, right? Because, and I'm going to go with by here, but we'll come back and talk about that, because by him, all things were created. Okay, so certainly he's preeminent over all of creation if he created all things, or all things came into existence by him, right? By him, all things were created. And we have this sort of staccato style in the heavens and upon the earth, the visible things and the invisible things. We see that alpha privative again there. And then we have this eta, whether thrones or dominions or rulers or authorities. All things have been created through him and for him. So some strong statements about Jesus' preeminence over creation. Why is he preeminent over creation? Well, because by him, all things were created. And Paul's like, in case you don't understand all things, let me spell it out for you. Heaven, earth, visible, invisible. And list all these different dominions. Through him and for him have been created all things. All right, let's go back and look at a little more detail. So we'll begin with this in alto. I think most English translations take it as instrumental, by him. A few take it as more in the idea of sphere or locative, and if you're reading the Murray Harris Eggenty or you're reading Con Campbell's Baylor Handbook, I think they both favor that in him, and then try to explain what that means. Like, that means not apart from him. Creation didn't come into existence apart from him. In his dominion, through his involvement or something like that. But I think I'm inclined to read it more instrumentally, and you can read the discussion about that. Ekatisthe, as soon as you see an augment and you see a theta, you think to yourself, aha, aorist passive, and you are correct. This is from the verb katizo, to create. And you may remember your aorist passive endings, eluthein, eluthes, eluthe. That's a third singular. So this is a aorist passive indicative, third person singular. Where is your third singular subject? Well, there's not, right? There's a neuter plural subject. Aha! And that's when you remember that neuter plural subjects, not masculine, not feminine, neuter plural subjects usually take a singular verb. That's do you remember the name of that rule? It's called the ta zoa treke rule, the animals run rule, which is an example of the rule, right? There's the word for animals, neuter plural, and there's a singular verb, the ta zoa treke rule, the animals run rule. So, and by him, all things were created. Boom, right? We have in the heavens, on the earth, visible, invisible. What are all these things here? These thrones, these dominions, rulers, authorities. You can read the discussion on this. Basically, the predominant view is that this is emphasizing spiritual levels of authority. So we're talking about the angelic realm, the spiritual realm, and it's highlighting the invisible realm. One possibility is that it includes both. So it's talking about both human rulers and angelic rulers, or it could be even angelic rulers that stand behind some human rulers, as we see in Revelation. But as we see, the language is expansive. Whether on heaven or on earth, visible or invisible, Christ is Lord over all, because all of creation owes its origin to him, and it's through him and for him that all things have been created. But probably I'm sympathetic here to the way this language has been used in Judaism of the time, and so indicating a curiosity about the heavenly realm and different levels of spiritual beings. And we read later in Colossians, it does seem like the Colossians are tempted to give too much interest to the angelic realm, and perhaps they're trying to do some of these things to appease the spiritual realm, thinking, okay, maybe if I do these practices, I'll receive a blessing, or I'll have these visions of angels, or I'll have protection from angels. And we might say that Paul comes in here, he's like, oh yeah, all those spiritual beings you're concerned about, Jesus made those, right? So yeah, some of them rebelled against him later, but yeah, you don't need to worry about those. Jesus made those. He rules over them. He reigns over them. This last word here, ekatistai, you can imagine it is coming from the same lexical form, katizo. You see that tie ending? You see something going on there at the beginning. This is a perfect passive. This is a perfect passive indicative. It's third person singular. Again, with a neuter plural subject. All things have been created through him and for him. Okay? And you think about the perfect speaks about something happening in the past, and then its ongoing state. We can say that even the creation came into being, space and time, and continues to exist. It continues to exist through as we'll see more explicitly down here later, through the superintendence of the Son of God, and exist through him, we read, and for him. Its ongoing state of existence relies upon the sovereign and gracious will of the Son of God. So let's go on and finish this short section where we're talking about the preeminence of Jesus over creation, the preeminence of the Son of God over creation, and we'll read verse 17. Kai autas estin pra panton, kai ta panta in auto sunestikin. Seeing lots of pontones and pantas, lots of forms of pasapan, pantas, right? All, every, all. And then that reinforced by heaven, earth, visible, invisible. So here we read, and he is before all, right? Before all things. And this could be in supremacy. That would certainly fit. He's the preeminent one. But if you read Doug Moo's commentary, and I think probably this is more likely to refer to temporal priority. So he is before all things. That's one reason that he's preeminent over creation. He existed before all of creation. He is eternal. He is before all things. And all things in him or by him cohere, right? Hold together. Or the Young's Living Translation tries to render this perfect as an actual perfect. Have in him all things have consisted. But if you look this up in BDAG, it notes that probably it's best to bring out the stative aspect of the perfect with the present tense verb. I think that's right. This is from sunistemi to cohere, to hold together, to continue, endure, exist. The New Living Translation, which sometimes has a very nice, a little bit more functionally equivalent rendering of the Greek text. I'll read to you here. It says, he existed before anything else. Right? That's how they're rendering that. He is before all things. He existed before anything else. And then the next line they render, and he holds all creation together. Now, let's parse this final form. It is a perfect. It's a perfect active indicative, third person singular. And you might say, why is it third person singular? Well, because again, we keep seeing this, the animals run rule. Do you know it by now? A neuter plural subject frequently takes a singular verb. And we'll just point out again, the word for animal is ta zoan. So the word for animals is ta zoa, animals, and then the animals run. Ta zoa treke, that is an example of the rule. So next time you see this, and someone is saying, why does this plural subject take a singular verb? You can whisper under your breath, ta zoa treke.